Roots of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Root of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E. As always, I'm just so thankful that you guys have decided to listen to me. If you're new here, welcome. Hopefully you stay. And if you are a listener, I ask you to please review our show. You know, the reviews really help in putting the show on the charts. So be it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts specifically, please review us, or on Podchaser. There's some really great place for you to tell us what you think about the show, some things that we can improve, possibly who we should invite. So I will read all of those. And the great thing is that we'll also get to read some of your reviews on the show. Sounds good? Review the show. Now let's get into today's episode. My guest today is Tapiwa Nyakauru, originally from Zimbabwe, but now living and studying in Ireland. In this episode, Tapiwa shares that his parents were the major motivating factor for him to get into STEM. He also tells us that his academic journey was not an easy one, and he gets into detail how he overcame some of the challenges for him to be where he is today. A PhD student in molecular biology. He is working on a project that focuses on identification of genes in water hyacinth and water lettuce, which are plants that are responsible for the accumulation of heavy metals from water. Tapiwa tells us more about his involvement in this research and why it is so important. I discuss with him how he navigates his PhD journey, especially when things become challenging in his academic life. In particular, we discuss the implications of the pandemic to his research and how he handled all of this, especially the whole work from home transition. Tune in to hear about all of this and so much more. Let's go. Hi, Tapiwa. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Anya. Thank you for inviting me. How are you?
I am great. I'm so excited for us to chat and for you to be part of season 2.
Thank you. I'm excited to be part of this show.
Yeah, no, I'm so excited to have you. But so let's get straight into it. Tell us a bit more about yourself. Who is Tapiwa? Where you originally from, where you currently based, and what are you currently doing?
All right. So my full name is Tapiwa Nyakauru. I come from Zimbabwe, from a place called Nyanga, and I'm 27 years old, and I've done a BSc degree in biochemistry, and I have a master's degree in biotechnology, and currently I'm doing a PhD in molecular biology in Ireland at Waterford Institute of Technology. So that's what I'm currently doing now.
Ah, wonderful, Tapiwa. So now before we get to know you, I'm going to play a little game with you, okay? I'm going to play a quick little game. It's going to be a quick word association game, just so that we can kind of get to know you a little bit away from the science. So I'm going to say something, and then the first thing that pops to your mind. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay. Favorite pets?
Give me a dog.
A dog. Okay. Yeah. Sports or news?
Give me news.
News.
Yeah.
Pap or rice?
Rice.
Okay, that's interesting. Your most annoying thing, like your pet peeve.
Well, it's difficult to mark myself, to mark down myself. I think the most annoying thing is sometimes I'm stiff, I want to keep things to myself. I think that's the most annoying thing about me.
What's the most common word that you think you use?
Let's call it DNA.
DNA. Okay. The last one. Describe 2020 in 3 words.
Well, unexpected, difficult, challenging. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. 2020 has been a year. But thank you for playing that little quick game with me. We just had to.
I enjoyed it.
Okay, so now we've learned some little things about you, that you like dogs, you like rice. That's pretty strange. I thought, most African men are like.
Well, I think, my favorite is rice. Yes.
I'm also a rice person. I'm not judging you. Like, I can eat rice all day, every day. So I totally understand that. And all right, Tapiwa, back to you now. Please find out about you now. So before we get into the sciences and you being in Ireland and you doing your PhD, as we later going to get into, what actually made you do science? What was the reason behind it? Did you always know that this is something that you want to do? Or is it one of those things where, it just happened to you?
Yeah, I get you. For me, I think it's difficult for me to pinpoint like a single thing which made me do science. I think it was a combination of different things which influenced me to do science. I can tell you 2 or 3 things that resulted in me doing science. The first being my father's brother, and for the purpose of this interview, I'll call them my parents. So my parents, they stay in America. So every time they used to come back now and again, for the holidays back in Zimbabwe. And so as I was growing up, and looking at them, they were like role models to us, say, one day I would want to be like, I would want to have a life like them, to be able to explore. I didn't really know much about what they were doing, but I know that they were doing something in science, all right. But again, the goal was just to be like them. So I grew up in a very poor area in the capital city of Zimbabwe. And in the society which we're growing, or in the schools which we're growing, I don't remember being asked what I want to do when I grow up. I try to think about that. I don't remember anyone asking me about that. So when I was doing my primary school, I was just going to school just like a normal kid, like everyone. So my parents in my high school, they took me to a kind of an A school, where you meet children from families which have got a better financial background than ours. So, I mean, it's an advantage that I was learning with people who are coming from other parts of Zimbabwe, but also the disadvantage was that you kind of feel like, low self-esteem, like inferior, like just looking down upon myself to say, I don't have what other kids have. But then I was always trying to figure out ways in which I can get into other people, ways in which I can blend with other students. And again, my main goal was to become like my parents. They were well established and they have a good life. So I wanted to be like them. So the other thing which I found to be helpful for me to also get into this society with children who were coming from different parts of Zimbabwe was to learn those kind of difficult subjects. So if for example, if you know maths, then a lot of people would want to interact with you because you can help them solve those problems. And by so doing, it also helps me to be recognized in my classes or with teachers or with other people around me. So I started doing maths. That was my first favorite subject. I was around in Form 3 by then. And then I went on to like physics. I went on to like biology. And then I stick with biology up until now. So I later on dropped, not necessarily dropped, but, my preference is now biology.
Yeah.
So, I then started doing biology and all these subjects, and I tried very hard to read and to understand more than everyone else, and by so doing, I was just getting to blend now into the society. After finishing my high school, one thing which I knew I wanted now was I wanted to do something with genes. I wanted to engineer something. So I tried to do some career guidance in, those universities which comes and gives career guidance at school.
Yeah.
The best degree which I could get there was biotechnology. But then I just applied for my university program at University of Zimbabwe, and then I got biochemistry. I just ventured into biochemistry. I said, look, I will just do it. I only got to realize that this is what I really wanted when I was doing my math. And I just said to reflect back to see, when I was doing my Form 6 around 2011, I actually wanted to engineer genes. Now that I'm working with CRISPR-Cas, now that I'm designing these primers and guide RNAs and all these things, this is actually what I wanted. To say things which have influenced me, the first thing is probably my parents, because they were sort of like role models to me. But the second thing was actually low self-esteem. So for me to be able to be seen as someone in the society or as someone in the group of people whom I was associating with at high school and secondary school, I had to do something extraordinary, so I had to learn subjects which other people think they were difficult, so that they could also recognize that, well, Tapiwa is somewhere in this class. So it was quite a difficult journey to get something good out of low self-esteem, but here we are.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. And when I think of low self-esteem, and I think of many others, it's something that's very crippling to a person. It actually makes a person not do a lot,
Yeah.
And I love how for you it was a positive thing. You really used it to make you better, like you said, to stand out, and you kind of took that negative and made it into a positive. That's absolutely fantastic. It's amazing that you're able to do that. And also you touched on the fact that you didn't quite know what you wanted to do until you were in masters. And I think with somebody who's listening and is like in the journey and they're like, oh my word, I don't know what to do, I think you touched on something important, because I think some of us do these degrees and we do them because we have to, right? Yeah. And you don't quite know why you're doing what you're doing, and it takes that one moment, and then you're like, oh, this is what I'm doing, what I'm doing, right?
Yeah, it's it's very true that when I was in my master's, that's when I had to reflect back to what I've done during that master's period and my undergrad, and way back to my my high school. Difficult to actually pinpoint to say, well, I want to do this, and then you focus on that. We just do the degrees because we have to, and in biochemistry, there are a lot of fields, There's plant field, there's animal field, there's human field, immunology and all those things. So if you're doing a degree which is broad like biochemistry, sometimes it's also difficult for you to actually say, I want to do this. So yeah, almost most of the people are in this same journey of doing the degree for the sake of doing it, and then we'll see how it goes. After I finish, I'll see how it
Yeah, we're just floating through. It really does happen, and but at least for you finally managed to pinpoint where you want to go. And Tapiwa, before we get into further in terms of your studies, right? You spoke that you grew up in Zimbabwe in an area where in a low income area compared to the other people.
Yes.
So before you went on to do your masters, I know you have a very interesting story that I'd like you to share, that you finished your undergrad and you wanted to pursue getting a job, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yes.
Yeah, and then I think like many graduates, it's really hard to find employment these days, right? It's difficult even with a basic with a B, which in the past was something really, really huge, but I think nowadays it's really difficult. And like many people, you try and look for greener pastures elsewhere. Can you please just share your story in terms of that journey?
Just before I finished my undergraduate degree, I was talking to my friends, and we were saying we're planning of leaving Zimbabwe and going to South Africa to look for some other biochemistry jobs to do, because we everyone always says South Africa has good things, so we wanted to go there. But I was kind of hesitant to go to South Africa, so when we finished, I went to Zambia with my mother, because my mother has got friends in Zambia. So I went to stay with my mother's friend in Zambia, and I was trying to look for something to do. It was quite a difficult journey, because this was a new community, and I'm trying to blend in the new community. I'm trying to look for a job, and I've left Zimbabwe, and I'm just in the middle of nowhere because I don't know if I'll get a job or not. So I spent much of my time walking in the streets of Lusaka, using GPS, looking for companies to drop my CVs. I did quite a lot of things, and then I just said one day and I realized that, look, I might not be able to get a job in Zambia. But I must tell you that it was quite difficult for me to reach that conclusion, to say I might not get anything in Zambia. Time might be flying and I might just stay here and not getting the job. And again, I didn't want my visa to expire in Zambia, so I had to go back home before it expires because I didn't get anything in Zambia. So when I got home, I started looking for jobs in Zimbabwe. I looked for teaching jobs. I looked for jobs in manufacturing. I looked for jobs in laboratories. And I remember one day I was sitting in my room and I was looking at my phone, just waiting for a call, normal call. Maybe someone would call me and say, look, we are offering you this job. And then I thought to myself, what if no one calls me? What if I won't receive any call whatsoever from anyone until I die? Am I just going to sit down and wait for the call to come? I really need to do something. So prior to that moment, I had applied for a place, a teaching assistant place at the University of Zimbabwe, and it was taking time for the approvals of our names and for us to get the jobs. I just said, look, I think I need to do something with my life other than just waiting for a certain company to call me or a certain somebody to employ me. So we have got a big yard where we stay in Zimbabwe, and I just looked at our yard and I said, look, this is a big piece of land. I need to start my garden. So I started my garden that very day. I said, look, I'm going to start my garden here. I'm going to grow my vegetables. Probably this is going to be my life forever. All right. So I started my garden. And fortunately, the following day, I got a call from the University of Zimbabwe saying, we are giving you this offer to do your teaching purpose. But I must tell you that it was a very challenging journey for someone who was so young as me, just to sit down and realize that maybe I might not get a call from anyone, or maybe I would just like any other graduate who's looking for a job. So it's quite difficult, and that I've a lot of people who are experiencing the same things as well, to just sit down and look for jobs and trying to see where we can get employed. So yeah, I've walked that journey, and I tell you, it's quite difficult.
Sounds like it. How long did you wait for your break finally to come?
It was let's just call about 6-7 months. But no, so this is 6-7 months off the calendar. But in my mind, it appeared like 10 years or 15 years, because I'm just waking up, sleeping, and I don't have anything tangible which I'm doing.
Yeah, okay.
So yes, on the calendar it's 7 months, but in my head it's like 10 years.
I can definitely imagine. But thankfully, you were able to find something to do, and you're just gonna fast forward a little bit. And in terms of how you did it, actually, was that you actually got a scholarship, which is part of some of your achievements, which include a master's scholarship at the University of Zimbabwe. And also during that time, you received another scholarship to study at UC Berkeley. And currently you're on a PhD scholarship. So obviously, after those 6 months, right, of where it felt like everything was awful, something finally clicked. I don't know, the universe, God, whichever higher power, if you believe in one, something actually happened. So for somebody who's listening and is also going through this thing, how did you do it? What was the secret with these scholarships? How are you getting these scholarships, Tapiwa? Let us know.
For me, there was no magic in doing these things. I mean, it was just my previous supervisor, the person who was my supervisor in my undergraduate degree. We worked together very well. So she had a master's, so she just won a grant from the UC Berkeley, all right, and she had a master's project which she was offering, but she was looking for a person who could do it, all right. And I approached her a number of times to say, look, do you have any program for me to do? But I think because this was a big grant for her, she didn't want to give it to someone without giving it a proper thought, to say, do I really need to employ this person on this project? So that day, which I was looking at my phone and I started the garden, the following day, she is the one who actually sent me the message.
Wow.
Tapiwa, I might have a project for you. Do you mind coming over to the University of Zimbabwe? I said, okay, I'll come there. I didn't have bus fare. I can tell you, I didn't have bus fare. So I had to look for bus fare, $2. That's what I needed. And I went to the University of Zimbabwe, and within 10 minutes into our conversation, she was already talking about me going to America, on the project.
Wow.
And I was like, this lady is I don't know if I'm a good researcher or not, but it seems as if she is believing in me so much. So this is actually the first scholarship which I got, all right, to be able to work on this project, which was funded by UC Berkeley, all right. But now I needed to be approved at the University of Zimbabwe. And it took 8 months to reject our master's by research application. Right? And they said, if you want to do master's here, you have to do a taught master's and then apply for these scholarships. All right. So I applied for the scholarships, and I also applied for the taught masters, which I got, and then I got the scholarship. So I had to put my scholarship, my UC Berkeley scholarship, on hold, right? And then worked on the scholarship from the University of Zimbabwe. Then in my last semester, I think my two last semesters in my master's, that's when I had to drop the University of Zimbabwe scholarship so that I could focus on the UC Berkeley scholarship. Because of the conflict of interest, you can't have 2 scholarships while someone doesn't have any scholarship, something like that. So that's when I had to drop the University of Zimbabwe graduate teaching assistant scholarship and then took this UC Berkeley. So to tell you that I did a miracle to get this scholarship, or I prayed, or I was so genius enough, I would be lying to you. It was just, I think when I worked with my supervisor, I think we had a good communication. I think I respected him better. I think I showed good research skills and things like that. So she thought I was the right person to work on the project. So that's how I got the master's in the master's scholarship, those 2 scholarships. And when I was finishing my master's now, that was in 2019, I got shortlisted for the scholarship here in Ireland, right? And it was my first PhD interview. So they shortlisted me, and then they gave me the date. So I prepared for the interview, and then I did the interview, right? 18 minutes of the interview. After that, then the following day, I got a message from got a scholarship to come to Ireland to do a PhD. I was like, wow, this is
wow.
So that was around May, and by September I was here in Ireland. So it's more to do with hard work. I think it's more to do with hard work and determination, and being able to understand that everything is difficult. There's nothing which is easy. So that's how I got the scholarships and coming here to do my PhD in Ireland.
Yeah, that's true. I think sometimes it's just the work that you put in, and congratulations on your scholarships. And also, I think, like you said, it also helps that you had a good working relationship with your supervisor. Obviously, that came a long way, and I can also attest to that on a personal level. That it really helps to have a good working relationship if you have with your supervisors, because they're able to connect you to all of these amazing opportunities. And speaking of the amazing opportunity, you're a PhD student, and part of your research, or rather your project, focuses on identification of genes in water hyacinth and water lettuce that are responsible for the accumulation of heavy metals from water. So can you please tell us how you got involved in that project, what it's all about, and why is it so important?
So, like you said, the project focuses on identifying the genes which are responsible for the removal of heavy metals from water. What we have seen recently is that there is rapid contamination of our rivers and lakes by heavy metals because of industrialization. So we do have mines in Zimbabwe. There are a lot of mines, and all over the world we do have mines. People doing mining, or drilling, and also we do agriculture, and we use inorganic fertilizers. So all the fertilizers which the water goes to the rivers and then the lakes, and everything is contaminated by heavy metal. Now, there is the need that we remove heavy metals from water if we are to use it for anything else. And currently, the processes which are being used to remove heavy metals from water, we use chemicals, sulfates, which are used to remove heavy metal contaminants from water. But these are chemicals, and they need to be removed again from the water. So we thought of trying to use the genes from other plants, which were found to be capable of removing heavy metals to levels that are hundreds or thousands above other plants. So we do have water hyacinth and water lettuce, two plants. They are responsible, or they can remove heavy metals from water. All right. So we are trying to look at the genomic level to see which genes are actually responsible for this removal of heavy metals from water. So if we understand these genes, if we study them and we understand them, we can then be able to clone them in other plants. All right. The reason is Iconia craspes, that's the water hyacinth and water lettuce, they are invasive species. All right. So water hyacinth is not even allowed to grow in Europe because it's so invasive. So even though we want to use it to clean our rivers or our dams here in Europe, we can't do that because the plant is invasive and it's not allowed to grow. So we thought of getting the genes from the plant and put those genes in a plant which is user-friendly, and then use that plant, for example, in Europe to remove heavy metals from our rivers or our lakes. So the project has got about 3 or 4 stages. The first stage being to be able to go into literature and look for the found in other plants to be capable of removing responsible for the production of proteins, which then chelates or which binds to heavy metals. All right. So what we are going to do is we are going to see if the expression of these genes changes when we put the plants under heavy metal exposure. All right. So we're going to get our plants and grow them in an environment which has got heavy metals, and then check if the expression of genes, right, if the expression of genes changes when the plants are exposed to heavy metals. If the expression changes, we hopefully want to see it increasing. If the expression increases, then it means that surely these genes are responsible for the accumulation of heavy metals by this plant. Then we have to clone them, firstly in bacteria. If you clone them in bacteria, then we are going to try and identify or try and see if the bacteria can accumulate heavy metals the same way as the plants were doing. If the bacteria is capable of removing heavy metals from water, then we clone the gene in environmentally friendly hosts, all right, like microalgae. So if we put that same gene in microalgae, we should be able to see microalgae accumulating heavy metals from water. So instead of us to use water hyacinth to remove heavy metals from water, we're going to use microalgae to remove heavy metals from water. So that's the whole idea, and it came about because of the rapid industrialization which is happening globally. If you check the water in China, you see that because of industrialization, there are a lot of heavy metals which are deposited inside. If you take electronic waste, we have cars, we have everything. So there's a lot of accumulation, and again, we have climate change. So because of climate change, some heavy metals which were not found in the environment are now being found because of, maybe acid rain or changes in temperature or things like that. So we are just trying to design a method in order for us to be able to remove the heavy metals from water, or to encounter the problem before it becomes too late. Most interesting thing for me is that I am doing something to do with engineering genes. That's what I always wanted to do. So it's interesting to me because in the process of trying to solve the global problem, I'm also doing what I want.
It definitely sounds exciting, and I can just hear the excitement in your voice. And when you talk about it, you're really excited about your work. And I think that's the best part, doing something that you love. But you mentioned that the project has got different parts, right? Different stages. And even when you explained it, I could kind of sense the different stages. So which stage are you currently on right now?
When you're doing a PhD, it's sometimes it's so difficult to pinpoint which stage you are on, because it's back and forth. It's back and forth. You go forward, you come backwards. But I've successfully managed to design the primers which can amplify those genes which I need. All right. And I didn't also mention that these plants which I'm talking about, they are not they are rarely studied at genomic level. We don't have much of genes from like NCBI database. So it was a challenge again for me to actually get the genes from the plants, because I didn't have the sequence to use to design my primers to use for PCR in the first place. So we've managed to sequence 5 new metallothionein going to publish on NCBI. We've managed to design expressed when we expose our plants to heavy metals. We've managed to get a couple of collaborations and a number of, and again to obtain the plants from from botanical gardens and other different stakeholders. So it's roughly around stage 2 now, which we've just begun. But again, it's back and forth, because I need to repeat some of the experiments with a different enzyme to be able to confirm my results, to be able to confirm my sequences before I put them on NCBI or before I write the paper on them. But I can tell you that we have 6 new sequences which are not yet on NCBI, which is a very huge discovery for me and my supervisory team, to say we've actually put these 6 new sequences on our database, NCBI database. So yeah, I'm kind of excited, but it's back and forth around stage 1 to stage 2, somewhere there. That's where I'm progressing.
Wow, congratulations on your discovery. That's huge. That's huge. Yeah, Tapiwa, you did that.
Yeah. So when I have my meetings with my supervisor, I keep on saying, so we did this experiment. And my supervisor told me, no, it's not we, it's you. It's actually you. You did this experiment. We only helped you to do it. So I'm kind of excited to see how it goes, to see how I can't wait for the day to see my sequences online with other people using the information or the publication or something like that.
That sounds super exciting, and I am excited on your behalf, and also just in terms of the research that you're doing, like you said, it's got so much real life application, and I think that's the best part, where you can see that even after you're done in the work that you do, somebody else can replicate it, or rather try and modify it to fit their environment. So congratulations on the work that you do and all of the exciting discoveries that you've made. That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. Just now, as much as a PhD, like you did mention that with a PhD, there's a back and forth. There's times where we even spoke about this off air, that there are times where you feel like you know what you're doing, and there are times where you have no idea what you're doing. And I suppose that's part of the process of the whole PhD journey, right? With that being said, Tapiwa, I just wanted to ask you that on those hard days, because they are there and they are a lot. When things become, challenging, in particular in your academic life, where is that internal space or place where you go to kind of steady yourself, to kind of put you back on track?
So what I've seen over the couple of years, doing my experiments here in Ireland and back in Zimbabwe, I think the first stage for me, what I do is I accept that it's difficult. It's something which I've seen to be helpful for me to accept that if you are doing not even a PhD, even a master's or even an undergrad, just to accept that this is difficult. It saves you a lot of hassle to try and argue with yourself, to think maybe you're not good enough, or maybe you're not capable of doing this project. So my first port of call is to accept that this is difficult. So even if I sit down to write an email, I tell myself that writing an email in a constructive way, trying to prove a point to someone or to say something, it's not easy, right? So it's difficult. So that's my starting point. But again, if I face more challenges, of course, I do have some personal times which I sit down and reflect on what I've done. To think, just to make me think that I'm not a failure. If an experiment is failing, doesn't mean that it's me who's failing, or it's just an experiment. It's not me. So yeah, I kind of sit down and think through it. But the other thing which I've also seen to be more helpful is that I call my friends. All right. So I also have a couple of friends who are doing PhDs. So we usually talk almost every Friday, right? We have a video call almost every Friday, and then we discuss our projects. I don't really know what they're doing. They don't really know what I'm doing, but we all face the same challenges of a PhD, of not getting results, of, troubleshooting, or of reading, or of maybe designing a certain method. So if we talk and I get to hear other people's sides, I also see that it's not only me in this whole situation of, having difficulties with my studies. There are actually a lot of people, who are involved. And that makes me kind of accepting that, well, it's normal to fail. It's normal to not have good days every day. The other thing which also helps me is if I talk to my supervisors. So my supervisors, they kind of increase my my confidence, something like that. Because when I talk to them, they tell me that you're doing really great, you're doing good. So that hearing that from them, it really helps me to soldier through. But again, my starting point is to accept that it's not easy at all.
Yeah, definitely. I think you touched on so many amazing parts of that acceptance thing. And I think sometimes when you're really good, or when you think you should be good, in particular because everybody's got that notion, tells you that, oh my word, you're a PhD student. So apparently you are good, you're really good, right? So accepting those failures is really hard, especially to sit with those failures.
Yeah.
To be like, you know what, I actually failed. And for you to acknowledge that, it's so much easier said than done. Those feelings.
It's easier to say it than to actually do it. To say, well, I failed. This is difficult for me. It's quite difficult to actually prove it, So.
And also because I think sometimes if you think you failed, or you acknowledge that it's difficult, it kind of derails you a little bit more. Like, because you have a plan, let's think about it in terms of a PhD. In your proposal, you have to do your research plan, right? So you say in 3 months, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And then in the next 3 months, and then case on point, COVID, that nobody saw coming, right?
Yeah.
It derailed so many people's plans, because we get taught we need to have a plan for our research because it's 3-4 years, and you need to be gone because there's a scholarship, right? So you need to do things in time. So now when these things fail and it derails your whole plan, it's hard, right?
It's very difficult. It's very difficult. I feel you. So we face it. We all face it.
Definitely. And just to bring in COVID and what you said when I asked you those 3 things about describing COVID, 2020 in 3 words, you did say it was challenging, etc. How did COVID implicate your research study? Did it stop it, and how did you manage?
So when COVID, I was just about to. Well, I had done so I had a meeting on the 11th of March, and then we went on lockdown on the 13th of March. I wanted to do more on the sequences, because maybe by now I could have published the sequences, or maybe moved to stage 2 or stage 3 of my research. So when COVID started, it kind of stopped much of my lab work. All right. So when COVID started, I switched on to go back to my literature review to say I need to do more in literature review in these COVID times. All right. But the most difficult thing in COVID was actually working from home. I mean, for me, working from home was quite difficult in the sense that I needed to prove to myself that I'm working. It's difficult if you go to, it's different if you go to the lab, you go, there are pipettes, there are beakers, and then you do an experiment. And then after that, you come back home. But if you're at home, then you're just seated and doing a literature review, and you're doing it every day for 2 months, for 3 months. You sometimes you feel like you are not doing enough. Sometimes you feel like you're not working properly. So that's one of the things which I faced during the COVID. But I try to do more on my literature review and on my planning, and my methodology, and then analysis of some of my results which I had. It was quite difficult to not to know when I'll go back to the lab. But here we are. But it's not easy in 2010. I mean, and on the social part of these things, I am here in Ireland, all right, very far from my family. And then we're just put in lockdown, and I don't know how they're doing. They don't know how I'm doing, or rather, we don't know when we are going to see each other again. It's something which was not really good for me, not to know when I'll see my family again, and I'm just staying here alone, and I don't know if my funding will be paused or not.
It's difficult.
It's like suspended somewhere, so it was quite difficult, yeah.
Oh, no, I completely get it. It's been a year. But we are just grateful that things are able to start again. And even with you and your research, you're able to do this fantastic work that you do. And hopefully soon you'll be able to see your family. I know with international students, that's always the hardest part, being away from home. It's
always hard, but we get used to it. I mean, I have moments where I think at home, but I have moments where I don't think at home.
Yeah, that's great. Tapiwa, just to wrap it up, on a happier note, you've told us some really amazing things we've learned about your research, and you taught us about persevering a lot and not giving up. I just want you to give us some final nuggets in terms of what would you say to somebody who aspires to get into the field, or who is interested in what you do, and the work that you do. What little advice would you be able to give?
I think if I'm to give someone an advice, considering what I'm doing or considering STEM, I think my first point is to explain to the person that when you are learning things from maybe masters or maybe undergrad, you are not learning those things to pass. You are learning those things to know them. All right. So I've seen it. I have a couple of friends or people whom I know who just, if you're in the lab, they do it for the sake of pleasing the supervisors, for example, or just passing and forgetting. So if you want to be a researcher, if you want to be in STEM or in any other field, I think you need to invest more in yourself. I think you need to make sure that your skills are at par. Make sure that you work so hard to get skills which you need to get, all right? At conferences, attending seminars, writing proposals on your own, and just train yourself to do these things or to think critically. Because I've seen that a lot of people want to apply for scholarships. They want to get a scholarship and then come to Europe or to America, which is fine, and I completely agree. But you need to remember that scholarship is money coming from someone's pocket, all right? And the person doesn't give away money just like he's getting it from someone. When they are giving you a scholarship, they are believing in you. They are actually saying, maybe you can do this thing. So if you get a scholarship, if you are in Malawi or in Zimbabwe, and then you get a scholarship to come to UK or to Netherlands or any other country, when you arrive there, you need to prove that you're worth the scholarship. This is something which a lot of people don't think about. They say if you get a scholarship, I'm a genius or I'm intelligent. But when you arrive to the institution, you need to prove that you are actually worth the scholarship. All right. So invest more in yourself before getting a scholarship. Invest more in yourself before starting to try to venture into research. Just have that curiosity mind to say, I would need to do this. So if I need to do this, I need to make collaborations. I need to know how to network. I need to know how to go to the conferences or to increase my skills and things like that. So I think, but I think that's my take-home message, to say invest in yourself and know that if you get a scholarship or if you are to work on a certain project which is funded by someone, you need to prove that you're worth it. It's not just getting a scholarship and then you don't do anything else. You actually need to prove that you're worth it.
Thank you, Sophia, for that. That's some solid advice. Yeah, I think so. I think one tends to forget when the money comes that, hey, actually, I have to work for it. When the funding comes, people sometimes tend to forget that you actually have to do the work. And I think investing in yourself is definitely key to just be a better person. And you learn more. The more you learn, the better researcher, like you said, you can be, and the better quality work that you can produce. So I think it's something good to learn quickly. And thank you for that important notes. And hopefully somebody took some that.
Yeah.
But with that being said, Tapiwa, thank you so much for chatting with me. I had a really good time getting to know you, for you teaching us a little bit about what you do. It was so lovely having you.
Thank you so much, Anna with an E, for inviting me to this wonderful show.
Thank you so much. And to everybody else who's listening, thank you once again for tuning in to another episode of the Root of the Science podcast with your girl, Anna with an E. Until next time, goodbye.